This episode of Marijuana Today is brought to you by Gallardo Labs, a design-first digital experience agency with a deep background in building world-class websites, apps, and products that drive sales and brand awareness. Gallardo Labs is a new kind of digital experience agency designing products and ecosystems that redefine what's possible. If you are in need of any kind of good commercial design work in the legal marijuana industry, be it branding, web content, product packaging, strategy work, or user experience, then you need to check out the things that Gallardo Labs can do. We were extremely happy ourselves here at MJ Today Media to work with Gallardo Labs on our very own website rebrand earlier this year, so I speak from personal experience when I heartily recommend the Gallardo Labs team. You can check out more of their work and learn how to get in touch over at gallardolabs.com, with Gallardo spelled Gallardo. That's gallardolabs.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 378 of Marijuana Today. I am this week's host, Brian Adams, recording on a Saturday morning from the Dog Pound, beautiful Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a cannabis patient, former bud tender, instructor, activist, artist, and now currently serving as the Director of Education at the Harrington Institute for Cannabis Education, powered by the Cleveland School of Cannabis. Harrington Institute was recently launched by former NBA All-Star Al Harrington as a social equity-driven educational initiative focused on representing people of color in the cannabis industry, found at harringtoninstitute.com. I'm back once again as a host. Big up to all the listeners on every side of the map, and thanks to the phenomenal sponsors of this elite broadcast. I love tossing in my 2 cents as we get serious about cannabis, business, and politics. I could not do this thing alone, so today I'm joined by one of the smartest individuals in the cannabis movement. And now it brings me great pleasure to introduce our guest. You know him as a regular guest and host of this show. He is also an entrepreneur, investor, and CEO of Vertosa, your advanced infusion technology partners. From the golden state of California, we have my guy, Mr. Ben Larson.
Mr. Adams, good to see you again, my friend. I don't know about the smartest, but I certainly have opinions.
You hold your own, man, for sure.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. It's good to see you again. How has it been going for you? You joined the show not too long ago, but now you got the mic. You got promoted pretty quickly.
Yeah, I guess so. I am feeling right at home with this whole thing. I like running off at the jibs, talking about all sorts of things, cannabis related. So this is very comfy for me on a Saturday and just chilling down in the office,
Yeah. They got us working on a Saturday, man. I don't know what kind of gig this is.
Yeah. Well, when it's passion, it's not work, right? So let's use the first segment to take a deeper dive into our respective profiles and learn about the men behind the mics. Our listeners may know you a bit better than myself, Ben, so I'd like to start if you don't mind.
Yeah, man, that sounds great to me. I definitely want to get to know a little bit deeper about your story. Unlike myself, but like many others on this show, you have roots that are deep in activism, which I always admire a lot. I became an activist because I jumped into this amazing industry and just really fell in love with it. But you took a different path. So kind of lead us through here. Like, how did we end up here? Where did it all start?
Well, thank you. And, as you mentioned, activism is, the key component of how I relate to this entire movement. it actually didn't even start with cannabis specifically. My political activism goes back as far as 2008 when I got involved in voter registration.
Okay.
So it was leading up to Barack Obama's inaugural term when I felt a strong sense of responsibility. And this responsibility led me to create awareness for our right to vote. And when I say our right, I mean people in inner cities, mostly Black Americans, and a lot of folks in my demographic, just growing up, a lot of folks weren't even interested in voting, coming from where I'm just on my side, not painting the entire picture for the Black community at large, because honestly, I say this all the time, you don't find a more conservative community than the Black church-going community, right? I used to have a grandma that say, hey, you get on that bike, you go down to the end of that driveway, you turn around, you come right on back. You're not going around the corner, across the street. You're not riding your bike in the street. You ain't going to no park, So it was overprotection for good reason, based on, the areas that we grew up, but the east side of Cleveland. But during the time when we were doing this voter registration campaign, it was my first experience in learning how to register folks to vote. I had registered not too long ago and voting for the couple of times now early on. So in addition to registering hundreds of local voters in our community, me and my father actually created a song called the Barack Anthem. Or Yes, We Can.
That is awesome. Are we going to get to hear it today?
I have the link. I might be able to get the link and share it to you. I have an old CD copy of it too somewhere around here.
That's amazing.
Compact disc for our listeners that don't know what that is.
Awesome.
So we circulated this music around town, and I had done music before. We were mostly hip hop, kind of a soul and funk kind of vibe. My dad specifically played the keyboard, and I later learned how to produce beats and, work a drum machine because of him. So we circulated this music, primarily the Barack Anthem, around town during election season and gained the attention of a Rock the Vote style group. They had picked up the CD, I guess, and reached out to me and said, could I perform the song live as people are going in to vote at this community center called Zelma Watson? And that's on the east side of Cleveland, right off of Kinsman Road, those of you who are in the know. So yeah, I did it. I loved, but I only performed with the one song, but as people were going into the polls, there were folks playing music, acoustic music. Then I would come out with my microphone and I would spit a few bars and on behalf of Barack Obama, right? So this actually got all the way up to the White House. Because I had sent it all around and I found, a Dropbox or an outlet to be able to get it to Barack. And I sent it out and I hope he heard it, hopefully he was like, Michelle, listen, put it in, turn it up to 10. I want to hear this. It has my face on it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good impression. I like that. That's good. Obama would be proud.
I hope so. So he listened, hopefully, and then, I even got a signed letter of receipt from Barry O. himself. I got his signature, so that was pretty promising too. Representation matters, folks. I probably would not even care to even dabble in politics. A lot of people say don't talk about religion or politics. I like talking about both of them, right?
Yeah.
Because both
and
of them.
I got the mic.
Indeed. And both of them intertwine with cannabis, whether you like it or not, right? So I love being able to talk about both. And I graduated from Cleveland State University in 2009, so just a year later, with my then girlfriend, now wife. Both of us grabbing bachelors in communication, and I continue to write and perform original hip-hop music to present day, COVID pandemic notwithstanding. And from 2009 all the way up until 2017, I hosted a radio show called 216 Radio, and this was an underground, local, indie, and classic hip-hop program on WCSB Cleveland, 89.3 FM. And that was Cleveland State's local college show. So that's where I got my radio wings or seat and was able to fart in the chair and play my explicit hip hop.
That's pretty awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And we were on at a witching hour too, Ben. We were on from midnight to 2. So we got to play whatever we want.
Yeah. Hopefully some slow jams. Those were the ones back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That is cool, man. Not many people get to say that they wrote an anthem for their favorite president and, well, at least got the receipts for it to landing on the desk. So kudos to you.
Yes, sir.
All right. So you busy on the activism front, but how does cannabis come into the picture? Like what made that transition for you? And I presume it was before the end of your time at WCSB. So 2017, that wasn't that long ago, but how long have you been in cannabis? When did that happen?
Yeah, so I joined the local Cleveland Normal chapter back in 2013. So I had originally joined as a member. I found an ad on a website or I don't know if it was Scene, maybe it wasn't Scene magazine. That's our local alternative weekly. Yeah. I think I saw it on the web page. It was just a website saying we need people to become members of the board for Cleveland Normal, and we host monthly meetings, and we have membership drives, and we try to educate and create awareness as a nonprofit, 501c3. So some lobby work, but mostly just awareness type stuff.
And
right?
you loved cannabis at the time, and we're just like, yes, I can get behind this message.
Yes. By then I had already started using cannabis. I started using cannabis in college, full disclosure. So I was about 18, and we were in which is no longer there. Viking Hall is what they called it, the Vikings, Cleveland State. And then, so we were in one of these back hallways where you go up the stairs, and we got up a few flights, and then the guy just says, "Hey, anybody want to smoke this?" And I'm like, "What is that?" He's like, "Oh, it's weed," basically, or bud. He might have said bud, because I think I still like to say bud over everything else. Hey, you got some bud? Where the bud at? I like saying it like that.
All right, I like that.
So it might have been weed or bud, but either way, both are still in my vernacular or lexicon.
Yeah.
So he pulled it over. This is a guy from Mansfield, Ohio, too. So he's up in Viking Hall too, going to class. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm right up the street. It's right downtown for me. So I end up living in the dorms, and just wanted to get away from my family for a little bit. And so we smoke, and I don't even know what happened. I'm not even sure if I did it right or inhaled. Peace to Bill Clinton. I know whether or not it did something, and it didn't do anything the first time. And I was like, wow, okay. So I think it was about 6 months or a year later that I can't remember the time, but it was still in college, my second year maybe, there when I took a bong rip. And that's how I knew it was.
That got the job done. That got the job done. Yeah. I think I recall my first bong rip too. And the room was spinning for sure.
Indeed. I hit it way too hard. I cleared it, in effort to not, look like the baby lungs in front of people. I wanted to be able to clear it, and then as a result, I had to go to the restroom really quick, and
it cleared you.
Yeah, it cleared me out. Seriously. So that's how I knew it worked. My eyes were red, just watery. I'm coughing and hawking, and every 5 seconds I could not stop coughing for like 15 minutes straight. And then the guy looks at me and is like, "Yeah, you felt that, right?" So I'm like, "Yeah." And that's when I understood. Even though some people will probably be turned off by that type of introduction into it, but to me it was like, "Oh, you think you got something there, huh? You think you can get me, huh?" So I came back to old Mary Jane, and she's done me right, even better than alcohol. I'm alcohol free, circa 2012 because of her. So I like to always say I went from hops to hemp, but it was 2013 when I joined Cleveland Normal. So that was well after college in 2002 when we first joined, and in 2002-ish when I think I first used cannabis. So this was far beyond that. I was already on board with it. I hadn't quite touched on the legal aspect of it or whether I felt privy to, lobby on behalf of it and all that. And, I never knew anything on that side. So, but fast forward to 2013, and during my time Cleveland Normal, I had led the chapter up until 2017. And this was one of 8 operational Ohio Normal chapters. I continued my voter registration work, volunteered my time answering phone calls, lobbying locally and nationally. We collected signatures for almost every single Ohio cannabis initiative that was out there. We even had people that supported Responsible Ohio and tried to help get that one through, even though it was super controversial. And so I served as the executive director, the membership chair, and the entertainment chair at one point. So I used to host
a lot of hats right there.
Yes, for sure. I used to host and produce monthly information meetings in addition to this event we had called the Cleveland Global Marijuana March. This is actually a global event that happens every first Saturday in May at high noon. So I produced that event and actually performed at that event several times. Basically a smoke out downtown Cleveland. We march around the Justice Center is what they call it, in protest for cannabis freedom. The irony is folks are literally locked up right there while we're in the park smoking joints for the day.
Wow.
So we did that for a long time. That's actually been going on since 99, well before my tenure. Shout out to Dana Beal and shout out to Jerry Braceman, who passed the torch to me. So in 2015, I founded a group called Sensible Cleveland that was sponsored through Cleveland Normal. And this was a not-for-profit ballot initiative PAC, or political action committee. So we eventually our efforts led to a successful lobby effort to decriminalize marijuana possession under 200 grams. So we had originally started off trying to collect signatures for ballot placement. We came up a bit short, about 520 signatures to the day. It still stings a little. However, Cleveland City Council saw what we were doing and picked up the language more or less. And in the city of Cleveland, to this day now, we talked about it on this show before, there is no longer a fine nor jail time for possession of cannabis under 200 grams. So many other cities in Ohio did that, and Toledo was the first in 2015 to do so.
Dude,
ours happened in 2020.
That's amazing. So you started as an activist, caught wind of cannabis activism, and then just jumped like fully in, more so than most normal people that are getting involved in the industry. So kudos to you. Cleveland's lucky to have you.
Thank you, man.
I know from being in the cannabis industry, you can get really sucked in, but at a certain point, like, okay, I need to start supporting myself if I'm going to be spending all my time dedicating to cannabis legalization, right? And so I noticed, on your resume that you are an educator, and that's pretty cool. Like, cannabis education is super important. How do you go from the activism side with Normal and then transition that to educating about the plant? And I guess there's kind of a natural connection there. When you're advocating, you're educating these politicians on the laws that need to be passed, why they need to be passed. But yeah, take us to that transitional journey. Like, how did that happen?
Sure. Yeah. It like you said, it kind of went hand in hand. By 2017, I became the lead instructor at Cleveland School of Cannabis, and I taught courses from history of cannabis to cannabis advocacy and to basic extracts all the way to dispensary operations. Now, I came in, we actually had an office in the original suite that we used for a classroom for Cleveland School of Cannabis. We had a Cleveland Normal office where we could use it for printing materials, and we actually used the facility to do our monthly meetings at one point. So we had a really good relationship with the school. On that front, we were getting students to join the movement too, as well.
Is for our listeners, is the Cleveland School of Cannabis is this like an independent school, kind of like Oaksterdam here in Oakland, or is it tied to an actual university?
So it is independent. However, we are state approved. So the difference between us and Oaksterdam, we actually have the approval of our Ohio State Board of Career
wow.
Colleges and Schools, saying that we have an official certificate program.
That's amazing.
So and we're on our way to full accreditation as well. CSC is. So it's some very exciting things going on. We're trying to be the first cannabis school to do so. And but yeah, from a long way back, I was a part of that early effort to legitimize the school and pick the instructors and so on and so forth. I actually was the first director of faculty there, in addition to teaching the courses. So it came natural. The founder of Cleveland School of Cannabis, Austin Briggs, he was actually a Cleveland Normal member, right? So I saw his name come across the mailbox, right? Our little P.O. box. I seen his notification that he wanted to become a member. So I sent this guy a T-shirt, for crying out loud, before I even knew he was going to start this cannabis school. So it was just the building blocks were there. A representative from the Cleveland School of Cannabis before the classrooms were even started up, named Donnell Watson, my man Details. Shout out. He came into one of the monthly meetings that I hosted, and this particular monthly meeting, I believe he spoke as a special guest as well, but. You know what? I think he came to one and then eventually became a guest speaker at one. I think the first meeting he was just there to observe, and then he ended up talking to me and asking me if I wanted to be involved in teaching a history course and an advocacy course at the school. Back then, they were just doing one-offs, where it was just a monthly introductory course. Now we're doing full-fledged majors, and so you can, sort of tune into whatever path you are looking for.
Yeah.
So cool. That was really cool. That's how going into cannabis education, I thought, was going to be uniquely special. I was already talking monthly for free, right? I was volunteering my time for Cleveland Normal and doing this for free. So when you said you're going to pay me to do what I'm already doing, essentially, I was like, yes, please.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And I continued to volunteer during that time, right? I continued to host weekly action meetings at the school, training folks in voter registration and how to get a local ballot initiative set forth.
Yeah. And so from that point, have you just been on the education side this entire time? You're kind of where you're at now is a little bit different from where you started with Cleveland School of Cannabis, right?
Right. Yeah, where I am now, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later in more detail. But the Harrington Institute is an online platform from Al Harrington, Viola Brands, in effort to fill the void in minority representation through education. Right? Because that's the main way we get into this industry, when we have something to back what we're speaking about. And a lot of us are less fortunate than others and don't have that path. I was blessed to be put through Catholic school. My parents put me through Catholic school, and then I ended up going to college. I'm paying that bill. I'm footing that bill now. But right. They did give me a solid foundation to build from. So not a lot of people have that opportunity. So I want to recognize that and try to be a part of a brand new educational initiative that's going to reach every corner of the map. So it's exciting what we got going on.
That's awesome.
But I guess we can fast forward to 2018 quickly, and I joined The Botanist, Umbrella Corp. Acreage Holdings, as a key employee manager, and eventually helped open one of Ohio's first medical marijuana dispensaries in Canton, Ohio. This was The Botanist in Canton. They have 5 locations. I actually worked at 3 out of the 5 locations and helped get them started. So I went from Canton to Wickliffe, a suburb outside of Cleveland, and then I eventually worked at the Cleveland Botanist dispensary for my final, tenure there. So I actually became a medical marijuana patient myself. When I joined The Botanist, it was about a year into my dispensary career that I was kind of resistant because you had to be on a registry and pay all this money. It took me a good year to say, okay, I'll do this. And that's thanks to my Dr. Bridget Williams. Shout out to you. I'll be calling you soon for my new fill period. But yes, Dr. Williams is a colleague of mine, and she's also an instructor at the school and happens to be one of the recommending physicians for medical cannabis in Ohio. So I worked at the botanist. My qualifying condition is sickle cell anemia. I've had that all my life, C type. So it is a blood disorder, to say the least, where the red blood cells are sickle-shaped in a lot of cases, causing all sorts of complications. So I was a lead dispensing agent at the botanist, and I even trained staff there, and I continued to instruct history and dispensary courses at CSC part-time while working full-time at the botanist for that stint. It was almost 3 years. It was 2.5 years there. So then fast forward to 2021, I resigned from my bud tender duties altogether and rejoined the Cleveland School of Cannabis, like you mentioned, as a director of education. But officially my role now is director of education at the Harrington Institute. More on that later. And I'm now on my way to becoming a regular on this fine cannabis podcast, Marijuana Today. I met Shay first as a listener and a fan, and also a fan of his work at Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We actually have a section in our advocacy course where we mention SSDP as one of the noteworthy advocacy organizations out there. And I consistently refer to MJ Today and MJ Today Daily when it was running as reference points during my classes. And students are enlightened by listening to this stuff that we do here at MJ Today Media, especially that amazing newsletter. We got to bring the newsletter back. I loved it.
Yeah, it was a good newsletter for sure.
I need it, man. Let's get that back. We might have some students or some folks that might want to help with that.
Yeah, Shay, it doesn't need to be you.
So I'm glad to be a part of the crew here, Ben, and I'm hoping to contribute more righteously resinous content in the future. Now, I'll shut up because at the moment there are 2 reasons why my mouth is dry. And I want to bounce this over to you, Ben, because everyone heard from me extensively and maybe a little too long there. But I am very much interested in your path into the cannabis industry. You said you didn't start the path of advocacy, but what's funny about that is you become an honorary advocate just from working in this type of industry. Absolutely. And I always tell my students that. So I'd love to hear your point of view on that, if you will, good sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for opening up and giving us a window into your journey. It's always fascinating for me, and just to see like how impactful all of us have been in one aspect or another. And again, just like kudos on just the path. Like that's super cool. For me, it's interesting. This all began in essentially 2015 for me. But as I go and develop myself in this industry and my life with cannabis, I often find myself retroactively going back and kind of being wishful that I had been introduced to cannabis in a better light earlier on. It wasn't until I got to college actually that I was really exposed to it. I'm born and raised in California, but a lot of people don't know I actually went to high school out in Utah, which I'm not Mormon. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's not my bag. And, being a kid from California, it was definitely kind of a little bit of a reverse culture shock going to high school in Utah. But the one thing that the positive light would be afforded me was a little bit of sheltering from the vices that the world has to offer. But I did end up going to school in California. Shout out to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, go Mustangs. But like most people know, our university system certainly has a culture of drinking. And I was introduced to it. Kind of, I don't know, fell in love with it is the right term, but definitely got sucked in. And I drank an unhealthy amount pretty much for my entire college career and beyond. And any exposure I had to cannabis, which I do very much recall, I don't know if it was my first time, but definitely early on, like my second year in school, I was at a small little gathering at a friend's house, and I had been drinking. And then I took one of those fat bong rips. And all of a sudden my world started spinning very quickly. I got the spins. And I was, it was just one of those things where I don't think I'm going to like this very much. And it was, maybe a handful of times I tried it after that. And unfortunately, anyone that it was probably so ingrained in my head, it was all the growing up with the DARE program and seeing this is your brain on drugs, commercials and the kids, melting into the couch.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I get mine over easy?
Yeah. And so it's just the few people that I did associate with cannabis, I'm like, yeah, that's not who I want to be. Right. But I want to go be an alcoholic and, do stupid shit every night and, ruin relationships and my body and all that for the, next decade. So yeah, it's now that I have immersed myself and started experimenting with cannabis a lot more here and there, it did naturally kind of start weaning me off my alcohol dependency. I still consume here and there, but at a much more controlled level, which is really nice. And I, again, wish that had happened back in college. I would probably have a lot more brain cells and memories from school. Yeah. And
it's interesting how they say cannabis is the culprit that kills brain cells, but we have actual proof that alcohol, does that. But while they sort of flagged this false proof of cannabis doing it, I really think, and organizations in the 80s, like you said, DARE and Partnership for Drug-Free America, which will never have that.
Yeah. Well, and people should know that the federal government has a patent for cannabis for its neuroprotective qualities. And so yet still a Schedule I drug, but I think we've gone down that rabbit hole a number of times on this show, so I'll just leave it there. But yeah, I actually, interestingly enough, I did end up graduating college eventually. I mentioned I was there probably longer than I should. I studied civil engineering, which I don't do any of that now, but I did have a career in civil engineering for about 6 years before landing in the Bay Area, where there's always interesting things going on in the Bay Area. It's very close to Silicon Valley. San Francisco itself started getting a kind of center of gravity in the tech world, especially around when mobile was becoming really big. So I lived in San Francisco from 2008 to 2016. And in that time, well, frankly, long story short, decided to quit my career as a professional engineer. I have a framed license and diploma still in my garage. And just hung it up, literally cashed out my 401k, which is probably ill-advised, and, got into startups and just this world of creation and making things happen and impacting people's lives. And I think, more than creating any one idea that I've ever had or helping someone else, I love creating and seeing things and seeing the future and helping create that future. And doing it for people, right? At the end of the day, good products, good companies, they impact people's lives. And, what a great way to have an impact is creating things that people want. And so I started doing that at a large scale, got really into that creation phase and helping others. So I ended up at an organization called Founder Institute, where it's a program. It's like a boot camp that's designed to help first-time entrepreneurs, and sometimes second time, third time, but a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, oftentimes coming in with an idea and maybe even still a full-time job. And the program was this intense, it's I think 12 or 14 weeks of just pushing people to the limit. Because that's what being an entrepreneur is. You're doing a lot of things you don't want to be doing, and you're doing a lot of it constantly, And so, we would take people with these ideas and be all right, this is how you flush out the idea, validate it, get some traction, and build the confidence to then make that your career, right? Not just like a side project. And so quit your job. Like, I've helped people quit their very good jobs at Apple and Google to go and do a highly risky startup of their own. And so, that kind of teed me up for getting involved in the cannabis industry. It was just really interesting. I kept getting invited to, first kind of happy hours that were not alcohol based. They were cannabis based. And, we'd meet up and it would be like, venture capitalists, lawyers, entrepreneurs meeting at like a co-working space. And then at a certain point in the night, it's like, all right, let's go down to the sidewalk and huddle up and smoke. It's cold in San Francisco. And so I'm like, this is bizarre. Like, why is everyone so like, why can't we just smoke in the co-working space? And at that point, I think that was the light bulb that went off. I'm like, this is inevitable. If all these high performing people, these non like stereotypical potheads, are gathering on a weekly basis to like relax and socialize and like do something that's non-offensive, like this has to legalize very soon, right? And so on top of that, there was pitch competitions and all this stuff starting to happen, like focused on cannabis, and it felt very raw. And I'm like, oh man, I've built this skill set of like guiding and professionalizing and validating and raising money. And that's what the industry needed at the time. And a lot of investors were becoming interested in the industry. And so, made the decision to launch Gateway Incubator, where we mashed up Silicon Valley knowledge and mentorship with cannabis operators and, mentors out of the cannabis industry. That's how I met Debbie Goldsberry from Magnolia Wellness, the ArcView crew, everything. And it just like, took these two circles of people and put it all together and said, all right, cannabis industry, not only do we have resources to help like really accelerate these businesses, but we can also change the culture of cannabis in a good way. Not all of it. I'm not, I wasn't here to come in Silicon Valley wash, the cannabis industry. But what we did need was this rising tide mentality, which from like the advocacy side, right? It's like it takes a village, and not just on the advocacy side, but on the business side. Like we all need to work together, and if we work together, there's actually a huge opportunity for all of us. So let's just grow this pie together. And there was a lot of free mentorship that dispensary owners and growers and Silicon Valley entrepreneurs started working together to kind of help grow the next breed of cannabis companies. And it was an exciting time.
That's pretty amazing. Would you say that was your turning point as far as understanding the connection to the advocacy realm and cannabis business? Yeah.
It's, part of being a good entrepreneur or, fundraiser is telling the stories that connect with people. And, Charlotte Figges from, Charlotte's Web fame was a really great story. One that I took all around the world. So I used to speak at a lot of tech conferences. I'd fly out to Europe and speak at various conferences out there. And, what I realized in doing that was that the U.S., while way behind the times where we should be, was actually pretty advanced in the narrative that most people were familiar with, right? People knew that there were medical states and medical applications, all that kind of stuff. But in many places in Europe, it's like still very much like potheads, Rastafarians, right? That's it. And that's like, especially in Germany and being able to tell these stories and, bring an entire crowd to tears and be like, have them question everything they've ever known about this plant was so powerful. And like you hear about, soldiers that are using cannabis for PTSD and getting ripped apart from their families or having to move their families to a legal state. And it's, it struck some major chords for me, right? Like, and I just started becoming on this mission of normalizing and providing access. And frankly, those two pieces are a big part of how we run our company and why we run our company the way we do at Vertosa. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about Vertosa too. When did that start, and what is it exactly that you do for listeners who may not know?
Yeah. So in short, Vertosa, we're an active ingredient manufacturer for infused products. We try to, or we do, I guess, make ingredients that are just trustworthy, traceable, super clean, reliable, repeatable, all that kind of stuff. It's just to create that consistency for infused products, so you get the experience that you're expecting. Which we all know those stories of the days of old where you don't know what you were going to get when you ate that brownie, right? And so that's what we're doing. And the sciencey side of it is that we're trying to make better ingredients, so faster acting, applicable to many different formats. We've done a lot of infused beverage work, around the country, and it's been a lot of fun. And so, but more importantly about that is that, we're a B2B company, and we're fairly ubiquitous. We don't have any exclusive contracts or anything like that. So we work with as many partners as possible to just lift everyone up and help tell that collective story. And it's kind of great. We've been able to, in the early days, people wanted to use us as a strategic ingredient, right? It's like, oh, we're going to use you. We don't want you to use someone else. But it's like, no, like this should be the base level. And then you should do your branding and formulating on top of it. And this should just be the new baseline. And with that, we've been able to build a community. Like our brands who would typically be viewed as like competitors, and it can be a pretty like competitive market, a lot of them are connected and friends and helping each other grow. So that's kind of exciting. And then the other aspect is, we've just built this company in the eyes that, let's just say, like we try to walk the talk, right? We talk a lot about social justice. We talk about supporting the Last Prisoner Project. So trying to hire from the Last Prisoner Project. I think, have a 30-person company now with 50% of our company being women.
I saw your staff. I looked at your website. That diversity is amazing. You got the Article Edis over there, the rainbow, man. You got all the colors, man.
A little United Nations going on.
Absolutely, it was beautiful. I seen it. I just scrolled through all the beautiful faces on the staff. I'm like,
thank
wow.
you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I take a lot of pride in it. When I was talking to my business partners earlier on, I'm like, look, we're a company, capitalist by nature. We want to make our shareholders successful and happy. But at the end of the day, all that aside, I want to make a company that people are proud to work at. And I saw an opportunity. This isn't a typical business opportunity that you'd hear a CEO talk about, but it's like there was an opportunity to build a lighthouse company when it comes to culture. And it's like, I'm like, I wanted, my team to want to wear their swag to a conference, and for people to look at me like, oh, I really want to work with that company.
Dude, I really want that Nike jacket that you're wearing, that Vertosa jacket that you're wearing right now.
We take great pride in our swag.
Where can I get one of those, man?
Man, I'll get you one. I'm gonna get your address.
Look, y'all can't see this, but Ben is rocking the Fly Nike jacket with the hat, and he got the pillow and the Vertosa pillow in the cut. I'm an engineer at heart, but I have a little bit of a creative branding streak, and that's how I like to express myself. So yeah, man, it's a labor of love now, and I think I'm a lifer. I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, I think I'd be stupid to leave the cannabis industry. It's like I just got too much going on, and I really love doing these shows, and yeah, I'm same.
I don't see in Silicon Valley, everyone's a startup entrepreneur to the point where it's almost annoying to meet them, right? It's like, oh, another startup person. Great. But I don't get that with cannabis. Everyone's excited about cannabis. Even and I was super I had a lot of trepidation about this, but my son, he's 4, he's in preschool now. And I was I started getting really worried about the administrators learning about what I do. But I can't hide it. And so like very first meeting, like we're literally in the principal's office because they do that for like all the incoming parents.
Oh, okay. I thought you were in trouble.
No, I thought I was gonna be in trouble. I started sweating. I'm like, I can run a company like without sweat on my brow, but like you put me in the principal's office, and I'm like, oh. And she's like, Mr. Larson, what do you do? And I'm like, well, you see, I run a manufacturing company of active ingredients for consumer packaged goods with hemp cannabis.
What was that last part?
Yeah. Excuse me. Did you stutter? And yeah, I mean, it was a great revelation. Like word got out. And all of a sudden, like everyone's like, "Oh, I hear you're in the cannabis industry." It's like, "Oh, you should go talk to Nikki. She runs a cannabis company." I'm like, "Oh, cool, my people." And so it's like, yeah, the cannabis and its place in the suburbs, in the far East Bay out here in Walnut Creek has certainly shifted over the years, and it's a beautiful thing.
Nice. That's fantastic. Very, very interesting stuff here. And I'm glad to actually get to know a little bit more about you. It brings more perspective. And I want to work with you on something at some point. I like to be creative as well as far as music and, just public speaking and, a curriculum development, however that goes. We'd love to collaborate in some kind of way with you at the school, man. That'd be sweet.
Absolutely.
But I really appreciate that. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up on this first segment?
No, man, this is great. I really appreciate just getting to know you better. And like this is a little different than our normal segment. So it's this breath of fresh air for me. And I am looking forward to. I love teaching. Like I always, even when I was in college, one of my favorite professors. He wasn't like my favorite because his classes were only at 7 a.m. and we had to take them. They were like core classes. But he was cool and they were at 7 because he would go and do his full-time engineering job after that class. And I'm like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to like learn life, learn a profession, and then just go back and teach as a professor of real life, not just a literary professor or something like that.
Absolutely, Ben. You just hit on exactly what we try to do here at CSC. I picked up the dispensary class because I worked in the dispensary. That's where I got the knowledge. It wasn't. It was actual applied knowledge that we could put in curriculum form and then show us students.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what we're trying to do here. It's unlike any other opportunity I've been a part of, man. So yeah. Shout out.
So yeah, the answer is yes. Like I definitely want to get involved. Like I love doing it. And someday my next career, I said I'd never get out of cannabis, and maybe it'll be cannabis related, but I want to be a teacher.
All right, you heard it here first, y'all. We got to talk off air and make something happen on that. This is a nice spot to end segment 1 and pass the mic to our producer, Shay, with a word from our sponsors whose support makes this show possible.
We're happy to have the support this week of our friends over at Dip Devices, makers of the popular Little Dipper, a mega useful handheld device that lets you sip marijuana concentrates as you would from a straw. The Little Dipper is great for on-the-go concentrates consumption and is priced at just $29.99 retail, despite being packed with features found in models twice that price. If you would like to order your own Little Dipper today, you can swing over to dipdevices.com/MJToday for a very special offer. And while you're over there, you can also learn more about how you can sell the Little Dipper yourself as a retailer in your own shop or dispensary. If you have your own shop or dispensary and you're not already carrying the Little Dipper, then you are leaving money on the table each and every day that you don't. So don't delay. One more time, just head over to dipdevices.com/MJToday to get your own Little Dipper and or to become a Little Dipper retailer.
So that was a nice first segment just to kind of stretch out a little bit and get to know each other. And hopefully the listeners picked up some jewels, maybe not, but hopefully you were listening and you got something from it and we can make a connection positively to some degree, right? Reach out to us. So segment number 2, I want to shift it back to business and politics. That is what we do here at Marijuana Today. We don't get all sob story on you every time. But, excuse me, to discuss in this segment, I really want to talk about them. They're Hill folks. I'm talking Capitol Hill. A recent article written by Marijuana Moment's Kyle Yeager highlights a conversation between Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and former Executive Director of Drug Policy Alliance, Ethan Nettleman. Ethan Nettleman has this new podcast called Psychoactive. I just started checking it out. So he sat down with Schumer this past Thursday. And while seemingly understanding that the Secure and Fair Enforcement or Safe Banking Act could address immediate banking accessibility exclusions, Senator Schumer recently stated that, quote, Senators Booker, Wyden, and I have come to agreement that if we let the banking bill out, it'll make it much harder and take longer to pass comprehensive reform, end quote. Now, while I agree that a more comprehensive bill is much more palatable to the people, I'm one of those people. But when we talk about a so-called bipartisan effort, I believe you can get closer to federal legalization by allowing safe banking now. This is through a defense bill, while continuing to fight for ongoing social justice in real time. That effort has never stopped, Schumer. I don't know where you've been at, but we've been here, still doing this. For the record, the Safe Banking Act is not my favorite bill. And even the MORE Act could do a little bit more as far as I'm concerned. But Ben, are we ever going to get a comprehensive piece of panacea-style cannabis legislation, or should we chip away at every opportunity, no matter how gradual? As a CEO of a cannabis company yourself, please express your thoughts on the importance of banking reform and a more comprehensive approach to ending federal cannabis prohibition as well.
Yeah. Lots of thoughts. I think, I will start by saying that I am absolutely supportive of the panacea, so to speak, right? The question is, how do we get there? And I don't know if the CAOA has a great chance of getting there. It feels like it's a very big step and doesn't have a ton of support. And so I then say, okay, we've done a lot. Like you said, this is something that we've been fighting for a long time. Some of us longer than others, right? And through incrementalism, like, we've made a lot of progress. Just look at like my state of California, right? We had Prop 215, it was medical. Then we went to Prop 64, which legalized the adult use market, and it was progress in a way. Definitely progress. Fewer people going to jail, right? It created a very complicated regulatory structure that is still to this day extremely hard to navigate. It has gotten better, and it continues to get better. And equity programs that were not included in Prop 64 have since launched at local levels, and we now have a system that is better than where it was before and has come a long way. Still has a long way to go, and we're not going to stop. And so, like, applying that to the federal level, which is far more complicated and a lot more cooks in the kitchen, like, it would only make sense to me to have those incremental steps to get to that end. I understand that banking itself is a great bargaining chip, right? But, like, I also argue that if we had a banking system, we'd actually be more effective in our attack on these other elements, right? Like, banking itself isn't just a capitalist tool. It actually has a huge impact for those trying to operate businesses in the space, which include the people that you're trying to protect, as a part of the MORE Act and some of these other social equity initiatives, right? Like, it is hard to run a business without a bank. Like, this is common sense.
Hello.
Like, I was talking with my team this week. I'm like, I'm a CEO that spends probably a day a week on administrative shit regarding banks and contracting and multiple entities that would go away if I would have an extra day a week. 8 days a week, like the Beatles, right? Like, that could happen if we had safe banking. But it's like, an investor asked me, oh, what's the bank balance? I'm like, oh, let me go log into 8 different accounts and like see where they're at. Oh, and let me go check the 2 safes where the cash is held. And, it's like,
oh, wait, they just shut down that account. Never mind.
Yeah. And I run a very professional venture-backed, B2B business, right? And it's like, now I'm at, and frankly, I've raised enough money to pay teams of accountants and MBAs, of which I don't have one, so it's like, I need these people to help me support. And still every day, 3 years later in running this business, I'm getting questions about like, oh, what about this tax and that tax? And like, how does that work? How do we calculate that? What do we do if that wasn't recorded? And it's like, it's mind numbing. And you want to hand people licenses and call them lottery tickets, but not give them a bank? Like, this is insane. Because who does figure out how to do it? People like me, people way smarter than me, people with a lot more money than me. And it's that much harder for those that don't have access to all the capital, all the resources, and all the knowledge. So it would make it that much easier to get people into the industry.
I agree, Ben. And, it's not the last thing that we're going to do on this. It's part of the picture, right? The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment had to get sneaked into the mix, right, to protect us, right, all the way back in 2013. Yeah. I used to run a nonprofit, Cleveland Normal, and a ballot initiative PAC with Sensible Cleveland. We had our bank account shut down for multiple reasons, even though we don't even touch the plant. Yeah. For crying out loud, we had to jump from, I think, 3 or 4 different banks during my time there, and even to this day, you can say I'm not touching weed. I'm talking to people about weed. There's a difference. Yeah. They're like, no. You're aligned with that whole movement. That's it. As soon as you fall into one of those categories, one of those FinCEN categories, if you know what I'm talking about, Financial Crime Enforcement Network, which is supposed to protect against money laundering and things like that, and kingpin drug trafficking and stuff like that. This is something that governs the reason why banks are hesitant in sort of reaching out to businesses like ours or businesses that we're involved with regard to cannabis, right? So it's always been, can I just take my money out the shoebox and get some interest on it, please? Because we bring it in, we're literally raking in the dope in, People come into, I used to work in the dispensary. I had to go into the vault and count the money at the end of the night. I'm not even going to tell you, hand over fist. I think that's adequate enough.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even want it. I mean, I wouldn't mind interest, but I'm not even asking for interest. Like, frankly, and this has been proven in the market, people are willing to pay for you to just like hold on to our money and keep it safe so I don't have to have cash. And like, and
they don't even want that.
Well, and the other aspect is like destigmatizing is like one of the most powerful tools that we have on the advocacy side, right? Normalizing and destigmatizing. And nothing is more stigmatizing than like feeling like a second-class citizen and not having access to like these third-party services. And it's embarrassing, right? Like to like have to like navigate conversations and be really afraid to tell people what you do. especially when you believe wholeheartedly that it is better for society, like that we do the work that we do, like to walk into a bank and know that there's a strong chance that you're going to be laughed at and turned down, or to have a family and know that you're running the risk of losing loans and services because you're associated with the cannabis industry. Not even, it's like banking itself is so much more. I think that's what people need to realize. Banking itself is so much more than just a capitalistic token, right? Like it's all these things that we fight for. And yes, sure, some of the big companies might benefit from it, but they're already benefiting from it. It's the big companies that have figured it out or have convinced banks that they have enough capital that it makes sense to work with them. So frankly, safe banking could be viewed as really a social equity initiative. And I'm not just trying to put lipstick on a pig, right? It's just like, I truly believe that. Like I know a lot of operators here in Oakland that would benefit from being like, oh, you need a bank? Yeah, just go down straight to the next bank. Like, stop thinking about it. Now you can move on to something else, like building a business.
A novel idea, right? They act like we're not a business, right? We are a business just as much as any other legitimate traditional business. In fact, we are the original business. I think George Washington wrote that in his journal or something. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a start, right? Like you said, you address social equity issues by doing this adjustment. You literally do. And it's on the table right now. It's been voted on several times, right? It's been, so it's a no brainer. I think this is the closer we can get to Republican support on something as well, unfortunately, right? I feel like this one above the MORE Act, if we want to compare the two.
Yeah, the Republicans might actually understand this better than the Democrats on a whole, is the fact that, like, try building a business without loans.
Right.
Exactly. Like an SBA loan.
Good point.
Or renting, like I know this, like we're looking at new spaces for our business right now. We cannot rent from a landlord that has a loan out on a property, right? Like that property has to be fully owned by the landlord to rent to us, or they have a huge fear of losing their bank account. And as a real estate investor, like you want to be able to leverage your properties at will. And so like if you see an opportunity, maybe take out a mortgage on an existing property you own to go purchase another property. Like this is the game that they play, right? Like I'm not a real estate investor, so I'm not hugely versed in this, but I have learned it's just like, oh, they now see themselves as taking a financial hit because they're allowing you, the cannabis operator, to work with them, right? And it's just like all these things, they just all add up and create such a challenging market to operate in, that where you waste so much time. And again, going back to all the lip service where it's like, oh, we're going to hand out like lottery tickets to people. And it's just like, no, man, like, no, like you're not there. The infrastructure isn't there for that to indeed be a lottery ticket.
Right. And once you get people a business, you got to help them sustain that business as well. So I think this is effective for the now, right? And we need to, turn our attention to other things and continue to focus on developing the social equity piece as we go along. There are very creative ways to do that. You see Denver doing it through delivery. You see, anything but a lottery, folks, please. Right. This is not the Mega Millions, the Powerball.
Yeah. Which I think is at like 656 million right now, I think.
Right. Something like that. We to get on that. I quickly want to turn our attention to coverage from Cannabis Business Times, a local publication right here in Ohio covering cannabis news. This news story first broke on Marijuana Moment, of course, but Cannabis Business Times picked the story up as well, and something else happened on the Hill. Insane in the brain politicians on the Hill. The House Judiciary Committee recently passed the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which people know as the MORE Act. So we're talking about, the Safe Banking Act, and now we're looking at the MORE Act. They're both on the table here. Rather than only address the complexities around accessing banks, the MORE Act would actually deschedule cannabis entirely. And personally, if I had to choose between simply allowing banks or pulling cannabis off the Controlled Substances Act, I'd have to go with the latter. I used to believe that cannabis could thrive if it was simply rescheduled, but after being bamboozled by the unscheduled big alcohol and big tobacco, I quickly realized that cannabis had every right as those far more harmful substances did, and we should be descheduled, right? And with all the cannabis bills bouncing around, I can't tell if these congressional representatives are trying to confuse us or take all the credit for something. Could we not just have a bill that combines all of the good parts of each proposal, or nah? Honorable mention CAOA, which we discussed on this show profusely, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act. Ben, what happens when we have several cannabis-related bills on the table at various levels of approval? Should everyone just combine efforts, or is that always out of the question?
Great question. To be transparent, I don't think I'm the best. I'm not the political pundit that might be the best person to strategically answer this. However, like I said in this big top of the show, I have a lot of opinions, and I'm feel free to share them. So here we go.
You got the mic.
I got the mic. So look, none of these bills right now are competing per se, unless you ask Booker, Wyden, and Schumer. It's yeah, you might be pulling away bargaining chips, but political horse trading transcends any one bill, right? And the way I look at it is you keep pushing these things through, there will be people that are okay, look, this clearly should have passed. You voted no on it. Let this one go through. It's kind of I imagine that only helps in conversations. It also helps that it's just a persistent conversation and a persistent platform to educate and have questions asked and answered. Hopefully, I'm pretending things are ethical and that people are actually interested in asking questions and having a dialogue about it. But we all know that that's not always the case in politics, unfortunately. So, whether it's the CAOA, Safe Banking, the MORE Act, them at being in different houses at different times with, votes going on, I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. It sure is confusing as hell, especially people that don't, like myself, that don't understand the full political process. But I do think that there was an interesting comment that I pulled out. Maybe I read too much into certain words. I know people sometimes just talk without thinking.